better now. Good afternoon. I'm Andrew from restaurant A.Wong. So we're a Michelin star restaurant in Victoria. If you guys have ever been on the Wilton Road, the big Sainsbury's, where the restaurant directly opposite. So we've been open since 2012, and obviously we're unable to cook at the moment. My chef jacket is getting a little bit tighter as the weeks go by. I'm just about fitting it this afternoon. But today I want to run through two dishes. And people always talk about dim sum, and they always talk about making it at home. The fact of the matter is that if I wasn't a chef, I just simply wouldn't make it at home. Because it's a craft, and it's a craft that's been evolving for the past 3,000 to 4,000 years in China. And I'm sure you'll see by the end of this class that what you get at the end, besides a lot of personal satisfaction, actually isn't very much food to eat. And the joy of eating dim sum a lot of the time is sitting around a table with all your friends and your family and really getting a big variety of different dishes, so different dim sums. And the problem with making at home is that we might put together something that might take 2.5 hours to make, but you'll only end up with one variety. And unless you make it every day, chances are you won't be making it particularly quickly either. So you will barely have enough food to feed you and maybe a partner if you're lucky. So, you know, if that really was the case, then you really wouldn't be eating very much for dinner. So the first dish we're going to cook is we're going to make some prawn dumplings, so pot stickers. Why we're doing that one as opposed to some of the other dim sums is because actually the skin is relatively easier to make. So let's run through the ingredients first of all. So very important ingredients is the flour. You cannot just use any flour, unfortunately. So in this kind of time, you know, a lot of people are promoting, you know, using up all the random stuff in your fridge and your cupboard. And, you know, my cupboards are no different, just random ingredients. I think we've got like dried cinnamon sticks, and I can't remember the last time I used cinnamon sticks at home. We have tin tuna. I'm not sure why. I think it's probably because my wife is from the Seychelles and a lot of tin tuna comes from there. And it's like a trophy in the cupboard. So yeah, the flour we use for this, you really cannot just interchange. So the flour that we use in a restaurant is this flour. And this is called, it's basically called high gluten flour. So high gluten flour is very similar to kind of Italian tipo zero flour. It needs to have a lot of gluten. Because why do you need that gluten? Because you need that gluten in order to make the dough stretchy enough for you to be able to pleat. But at the same time, you need the gluten to make the filling water resistant. And I'll talk you through the process afterwards. Very important. Do not just randomly use bread flour or cake flour, because it won't be the same. You'll end up with a very mushy texture to your dumpling. So obviously, we need to have some prawns. So we have some prawns here, which we will talk through in a minute, what to do with them. We have some corn flour. We have some spring onions, sesame oil, vegetable oil, Chinese rice wine. And here, if you look at your ingredients list, it says ginger and spring onion water. And I'm sure a lot of you are asking, well, what is ginger and spring onion water? Basically, it's all the trim of your ginger and your spring onion put into water, squeezed with your hand, and then just left overnight in the fridge. And what you'll end up with is, yeah, funny enough, water that is flavored with ginger and spring onion. Okay, so first of all, we're going to make the dough. High gluten flour in. You know, there is a recipe for this, but in all honesty, the truth of the matter is when you're making pastry for dim sum, it's very dependent on the temperature of the water, how quickly you add it into the machine, the humidity of the room. So during the summertime, we'll probably add less water. In the wintertime, we'll add a little bit more. In the winter time, when the water coming out of the tap is very, very cold, you probably have to add a little bit more. So putting it into the KitchenAid with a paddle. You can't use a dough hook a lot of the time because it won't work it properly. So I'm going to turn it on now. The secret is add the water slowly and don't be overzealous, because there comes a point where you think, oh, it's enough, no, add a bit more. And then when you've added that little bit more, it ends up being too much, and you can't really save it from there. You can't save it by adding more flour, because your end product will be different if you just add more flour to it after the dough is already formed. So turn the machine on. I'm using bottled water here, but tap water is fine. Add it in slowly. Someone's just asked the question, how much flour? I hope I answered that question already. By the time you finish kneading it out of the machine, it should only have just about come together to form a dough. And funnily enough, my advice to you guys about not being overzealous, I've actually ended up doing it myself. And so I've ended up creating a dough that is too wet. But not to worry, because this is, I have one that I made earlier. So as you can see here, it's completely formed into a dough, which is wrong. The way that it should have ended up is that it should have been like a dry mass. But not to worry. I've got another question here, and the question is, can you do the mixing with a spoon? You don't even have to use a spoon, to tell you the truth. What you can do is that you can just do it all by hand, like you would with traditional pasta. So this dough at the moment is very, very, very wet. But I want to show you what we're going to do with it. So we're going to knead it out. Now this flour here, we probably got what? We probably got about 100 grams here. If you work it out, each dumpling normally uses between about 5 and 7 grams. Now what I'm going to do with this now, I'm going to get your dough, I'm going to roll it, and I'm going to fold it. I'm rolling, and then I'm folding. So in the restaurant, we have the additional aid of a machine that will sheet the dough for us. So we just pass it through the machine probably about 40 or 50 times. And what you will find is that as you fold it over, it becomes firmer, but at the same time, it becomes more elastic. And this actual process here is very, very important. Some restaurants, they don't do it. And what happens if you don't do it? Basically, if you leave this dough in the fridge, overnight, it'll become more and more wet, and it'll become more and more sticky. You use that to wrap your dumplings, and you steam them up. They have a bit of a wet texture to them, as opposed to having a firmer kind of thin kind of pasta kind of texture to them. Now pasta is different because it contains egg, which automatically solves a lot of these problems. But the downside is a lot of dumplings, you don't use egg, because once you put egg into the dough, what happens is it becomes very, very dry and it doesn't stick. So when you try to pleat the dumpling, it won't hold together. You see, just folding. Again, you don't have to be too precious about this. And this is good therapy at this kind of time. Feel free to ask any questions as we go along. If you have a pasta machine, by the way, you could probably run it through a pasta machine. As you can see from the dough, the more I sheet it, the more firmer it becomes. Again, sometimes you can wrap it into 2, you can also wrap it into 3. We're just trying to basically work the gluten in a linear way. Someone's just informed me that they have a pasta machine, which is great. But you know, now that gyms are closed, this is a good alternative to going to the gym. And you know, in a weird kind of way, the thing about dim sum is a lot of these things, they just can't be rushed. You know, I wish I could say, you know, just mix it in a bowl, you know, whack your hand around it, and in 5 minutes, you know, you're going to get some dumplings. Because the fact of the matter is, you're just not. And actually, what you'll find, what you'll see from this, and especially from the egg tart recipe as well, is that if you're going to do dim sum, don't sit down on your sofa one night and go, you know what, I'm going to make some dumplings tomorrow. Always think about 2 or 3 days ahead, and then break down the process. So you break down the process in this example to pastry, buying the produce, marinating the produce, chilling the produce after marinating, and then on the last day when you actually want to, the wrapping and the cooking. Okay, so we've sheeted this a few times. Ideally, you want to sheet it a lot more than this. And afterwards, what we're going to do, you'll see from here, I'm just going to roll it up. I'm going to roll it up into a log. Roll it into a log, and I'm going to get some cream. I've got another question here. It says, or just make chung fun when you decide 10 minutes in advance. Yeah, you could do that. Even chung fun, like the chung fun that we make in the restaurant, the batter that we use is a mixture of rice flour and water chestnut flour. And even that, a lot of the time, we have to let it rest overnight before we use it in order to get a really nice chung fun. So you wrap that into the sausage. Now, what we do, we put that in the fridge. Put that in the fridge and let it firm up and relax. And what you'll end up with is you'll end up with a sausage like so that is ready to use when we're at that point in the recipe. I've got another question in here. Will this recording be available online? Yes, it will be. I believe that it will be available on YouTube. So watch out, Victoria Bid will have the link to give you after this little class. So we've made the filling. Well, we've made the wrapper. Now it's time to do the filling. So filling, what do we need? We need to have a chopping board and a knife. Now, with all Chinese cooking, a lot of the time, the beauty is we only use one knife. We use one knife for everything. So we use it for chopping, for flattening things out, for tenderizing, multiple uses. Another question is, how long in the fridge? So you want to leave it in the fridge for a minimum of 40 minutes to an hour as an absolute minimum. And then after that, what you want to be careful of is that you don't want to leave it for too long. So, you know, overnight is fine. If you start leaving it for several days, what will happen is that it will become really, really soft, the dough. And it'll make it a little bit harder to work with, and it'll be harder for it to become very watertight if you put a very, very liquid filling in. So this dough here, we're making it for pot stickers, but it's the same dough that we also use for Shanghai dumplings. Another question through is also, can you freeze the dough sausage? Or should I freeze the dough when they are made into wrappers? Right, so you can freeze, you can do either method. Now, the only thing you need to be careful of is that if you make the dumplings and then you freeze it, you must make sure that the filling to your particular dumpling isn't too wet. So if you try to freeze Shanghai dumplings, what will happen is that the dough that you wrap the dumpling with overnight in the freezer, it will expand and it will crack. And so when you cook it afterwards, liquid or the filling or the moisture from the filling will begin to leak out of the dumpling during the cooking process, which is not a particularly good thing. Another question here. I'm finding it really difficult to find well-stocked Asian supermarkets in my area, Southwest London. So can you recommend any good online supermarkets? Yeah, you know, see, we now do home delivery. So go there, or Southwest London. I don't even know where Southwest is. You should look up another supermarket called Long Dan, which is Longdan. Anyway, back to the filling. We've got our prawns. Now, this is very different to an Italian pasta, okay? So an Italian pasta, a lot of times you will blitz up the filling. You might add egg and maybe some cream to it. And it's almost like a paste, a puree, should I say. Now, it's very important that when we make fillings for Chinese dumplings, it is not a puree. It is a paste. And it's a very, very different thing altogether. So what we're going to show you is what to do with this prawn. So this prawn, so been peeled. Now what I want to do, I want to cut little bits off the end. They're about 2 millimeter, 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter segments. Right, now I'm going to leave that to one side. Now the rest of this prawn, I'm going to use the side of the knife and I'm going to hit it. Now what you're doing there is you're creating a meat paste. That is not a puree. If I was that through a machine, your end product would be very, very different in texture. Right? With Chinese dim sum, a lot of the time, with the filling, you want it to have a little bit of bounce to it. Now, if you puree something up, you will lose that bounce. And you might think, oh, it's just the same. You're whacking it with the side of your knife. It's, you know, it's the same as putting it in a machine. It's not the same. Again, take the ends off. Now, why do we keep these small bits at the end? We do that because I'm going to mix that through the filling. And what's that going to do? You're going to get a variety of textures in your dumpling. So you're going to get the little bits which give it like little nuggets of pure prawnness. And that's going to be bound together by this paste. Using the side of the cleaver. I got another question. We're using bread flour. I guess it's better. Well, bread flour actually is a good alternative because bread flour is high gluten flour still. So we've got our mix. It's a paste here. We're going to add it in. We're going to add the little bits like so in. And then I prepared a little bit of extra bits earlier on. Add all that filling in. Amazing. So now we've got the basis of our filling now. So to this filling now, what we're going to do, we're going to add some seasoning. Basic seasoning, obviously salt, pepper, which I've already added before you guys came in, because the salt also has additional use, which is basically, it starts to bind the whole thing together. Right, to this, we're going to add a little bit of Chinese rice wine. Again, I'll give you guys the recipe later, or you guys should have the recipe already. I'm also going to add a little bit of corn flour. If you don't have corn flour, you can use potato starch. And what's this going to do as well? It's going to bind it together and create a bouncy kind of fish cake texture to it. And then to that, I'm also going to add the ginger water. Again. And I'm going to start mixing. What you'll see, and you come closer, you're beginning to create a single mass. What we're also going to try and do, we're going to try and work the gluten in this protein. So we're just going to hit it a few times against the bowl. Someone's asked me, can you use the same dough for other fillings? Yes, of course you can. You can use this dough for many, many fillings. So what you'll find is as you hit this prawn mix, it'll begin to bind together a little bit more. Okay, now we've got a mix. It's basically holding itself, its own shape. We're going to add a little bit of spring onion. Chopped spring onion. And again, don't follow these recipes, to 100% to the gram, because a lot of it is up to your interpretation as well. If you're allergic to certain things, don't add it in. Think of this in terms of principles. So in terms of filling, pastry, what you do to the filling, it's pretty much the same. If I was to use chicken instead of prawn, I would do a very, very similar process to the chicken before making a filling. If I was to use beef or lamb or just fish, for example, the principles are all the same. Adding the corn flour, adding the seasoning, hitting the filling like this in order to create a meat paste. Okay, that's done. As you can see now, it's holding its shape very, very well. Doesn't slide around at all. And it's got the ginger water in there. It's got the Chinese rice wine in there. And what that's going to do is going to impart moisture into the filling. So, what you don't want is to basically end up with like a dry, chalky kind of filling. You want it to be really quite bouncy. And again, if you're talking about the measurements of rice wine, the measurements of seasoning, it's very, very subjective. There's a basic amount you should add, a little pinch, 2 pinches of salt. Chinese rice, and again, it's dependent on how much you want to put in. Don't be too precious about it, and don't worry too much. Just use your instinct. So we made the filling now. Now we're going to start wrapping. So we're going to start wrapping. So we're going to take our dough out of the fridge, like so, and we're going to unwrap it. Someone just asked us another question. Someone says, work the filling by hand. That seems a lot of effort. Dim sum is a lot of effort. I'm not going to lie to you guys. This is the one big, big misconception about Chinese dim sum. A lot of the time you might go to restaurants and order 30, 40 different types of dim sum for the whole family. And there is no real second thought about the work and the time that goes into making this stuff. So there's a sausage. We're going to roll it out. Also, guys, when you make this sausage, what you have to be careful of is that when you roll it into a sausage, you need to roll it tightly, because if you get something like that, which is an air hole in the middle, you can't use that for a dumpling yet. Because what will happen is that when you roll it into a pastry, it will split open where the hole is. So a normal dumpling is about six grams of filling, which is about that. 6 grams. So we've cut across the sausage. Now, if you look at that now, the cross section of that is going to be a round circle. Question, has everything gone into the filling mix now? Yes. Yes, everything has gone in. If you really wanted to, you didn't want to mix it by hand, your other alternative is to get the filling and put it into a mixer. Put the mixer or with a paddle in. Don't put it with a dough hook or anything else. And then beat it with a paddle. That would also work. And then when you roll these dumplings, the important thing is you've got your circle. You flatten it down so you create a circle. And then you get a small rolling pin and you be patient. You look from above. Now, in different dumplings will require different wrappings. So if I'm making a Shanghai dumpling, I would only really roll the edge because I want the middle of this skin to be slightly thicker than the edge. But the dumpling that we're making today, I'm not that fussed because it can pretty much be even thickness. So after that, you end up with a dumpling skin, like so. And then we can start filling. So the filling, again, with the filling, you could leave it in the fridge. Put the filling in. How much filling, you're probably asking, right? How much filling is dependent on, number one, how good you are at wrapping, and number two, how big your skin ends up. So I'm going to try and show you this. So you put it filling there, first fold, there. You end up with a half moon shape, like so. Try again. We can roll that pastry out again. Again, it's one of those things you're just going to have to practice, I'm afraid. It's not going to come straight away. You're going to have to practice or just go out. I'll do this with cameras. The most important one is the first fold. I always tell people when I'm teaching them that imagine this is a 360-degree clock, and the first fold is normally about 5 o'clock. That's your first fold there. And if you follow that first fold, normally what will happen is that the other folds will lead on from it because of the natural arch. You end up with a dumpling. Like so. We can make one more with you guys. Well, question then, can you freeze them once they are steamed? You could steam them once they are steamed, absolutely. But the only problem is a lot of the time is if you steam them, if you freeze them after you steam them, sometimes what you do, you begin to lose moisture from the filling. With the filling, we have 3 dumplings. Now you're ready to cook. Done. So 3 in a thick portion. Now we're going to cook them. I know it seems very, very difficult to teach this thing on a Zoom call. You really need to have someone in front of you really talking you through it. So the way you can cook them, there are several ways you can cook this. Can you freeze them before steaming? You can, as I said before. The only problem you have to think about is that if there's a lot of moisture in the filling, then when it freezes and the skin cracks, you'll begin to lose some of that moisture. Now, in order to cook these, there are several ways you can do it. You can either steam them, which is okay, as in you can use a Chinese bamboo basket. Use a basket like this, and you can buy some dim sum paper, which looks like that, and basically just non-stick paper, and then you can steam them until they're cooked, and then you can take them out and you can pan fry them after. That is one option. It's not my preferred option. My preferred option is because I want to have a crispy bottom. I normally use this method, which is a combination of frying and steaming. So oil's getting hot in the pan. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add the dumplings into the pan when it's hot. Like so. I just want to toast it. I'm going to give it enough until it gets color. So the lard in the ingredients list. The lard in the ingredients basically to add some texture into the dumpling filling. It is optional, but basically while you're mixing it, you can put some lard into it, and basically it'll give it the filling a softer mouth texture. What am I looking for? I'm just looking for now, then to the point, in order to get these to toast. As you can see, they're not quite toasted yet. Patience. Check it now. See they're getting toasted. So now at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some water to the pan. Now this is obviously stainless. Then lid, cover it, and then turn down the fire. And be careful for not to explode. Yeah, be careful. was quite entertaining. Oh my God. Yeah, if you put a lot of oil in, you'll get a little explosion going on in your kitchen. Not to worry. Okay, so what we've got in here now, we've got some water, and it's basically steaming the dumplings inside now. How long would this take to cook? It'd probably take about 3 or 4 minutes to cook. And what's going to happen is that as this steams, the water's going to evaporate, and all you're going to be left with is like a crispy bottomed pot sticker. How high is the heat setting? Again, you've got to adjust it yourself. Number one, you don't create too much mess in your kitchen. But you want to, number one, you want to have it on a high heat, medium to high heat, to toast the bottom of the dumpling in order to get the color. And then once you put the water in, just be careful that you don't turn it on too high too quickly. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of popping like you just got just now. So right now, if you can see into the pan, it's still got some moisture in there, which is slowly evaporating. And basically, as I leave the lid on, it's basically steaming the dumplings inside. So we've toasted the bottom, now we're steaming the inside of the dumpling. Okay, so someone likes to do so you've got your cross section, which you push down. As you push down on a dumpling, you should end up with a circle. So all we're going to do now is continue that shape, but just make it thinner. You end up with a pastry, like so. Get some filling. As I said, there are loads of ways of wrapping this. But I always said that the best way to do it is if you end up, again, your first pleat, and then let all the other pleats just follow it. And you should end up with like a half moon shape like that. Someone also like how many steamers we have in the kitchen. We probably have about 30 in the kitchen. So it's cooking away. As we look at the pan, the water is slowly evaporating. You can see. If you just want to check the bottom, for example, you need the bottom to have that nice toasted color, which you can see from here. It does. All that water is slowly evaporating. What I'm going to do, I know this isn't very advisable because of kitchen safety, but this is the way that we cook it always. Add some more oil in, and basically what it's going to do is going to re-crisp the bottom for us. So someone's asking if the dough will go translucent when it's cooked. No, not with this particular dough. So what makes doughs translucent is the starch that you use in the recipe for the dough. Now, a lot of starches, for example, if you want them to be translucent, you really use to have a combination of either wheat starch, potato starch, or tapioca starch. So a traditional hagao dumpling, for example, would have those starches in, and that's what makes it translucent. For flour, because it contains, flour is a mixture of wheat starch and gluten, it becomes opaque. So all the water now is gone. These are cooked. You can turn it off. We can see the bottom of them. We've got a nice toasted bottom. Again, you don't have to be too precious. You really want to get that toasted bottom. Very, very important when you're making a dumpling. And then you're thinking about possible condiments. So we have a series of condiments that we have in our kitchen. Some of them at home. I think my personal preference for this jar is actually not what is inside. It's a black bean sauce that we made. But actually, some things that are really good for this, for example, is XO sauce. And I don't know if you guys know what XO sauce is, but XO sauce is basically dried scallop and chili oil, cooked out for several hours until it's soft. Sometimes it will contain dried bacon from China, sometimes it won't. And it has an incredibly rich umami flavor to it. So you've got the XO sauce, put a little bit of garnish or spring onion over the top. A little bit of sesame oil. Seeds. If you want to put some smoked vinegar on it, you could do. It's not necessary. Play with. As I said, with this kind of thing, it's very much about the principle of it. So you want to get a dumpling, which has got a nice filling inside, which is not too hard. And you want to get a pastry which holds it watertight. And when you're cooking this particular type of dumpling, you want to make sure that it has a crispy bottom on one side and a soft texture on the other side. All right, excellent. So that's your savory course for this afternoon. I'm sure all of you are going to start making this at home. Now we're going to move on. We're going to move on to a dish called egg custard tarts. Can we see the inside of the dumpling? Someone was asking. Want to see the inside of the dumpling? Very important to have that crispy bottom. Obviously, have someone at home to help you wash up and clean up after you. As we move on, we're going to make you now an egg tart, which is a very, very famous tart in Hong Kong. And just remember that there are lots of different types of egg tarts. So even in Hong Kong, there are some that will be short crust pastry, some that would be puff pastry, but a lot of the time, the tart that I particularly like, it's called flaky pastry. Now, flaky pastry is not the same as puff pastry. It's a lot more loose in its texture, And unlike puff pastry, which is still very, very hard, this pastry is very, very, very crumbly, but you can still see the layers. So there's things that I particularly think are a must with egg tarts. Number one, the pastry needs to be flaky. Number two, when it comes out, you have to be able to see all the layers. Now that might seem a very easy thing to do, but actually it's very, very difficult. And I've been spending a lot of time on lockdown trying to get the layers to show more neatly, but it is very difficult. And the reason is that when you make this dough, puff pastry is normally maximum about 1-to-1 pastry to butter. Now this filling that we're going to use, well, not this filling, this pastry we're going to use is approximately like 1 part pastry to about 2.5 to 3 parts oil filling on the inside. So how do we do it? I'm not going to go through the whole process of mixing it because it's a very, very long process, and actually it can take several hours. But I want to tell you that the recipe that you guys have is just a list of ingredients. I just want to talk you through it. So what you want to do, you want to create 2 pastries, right? One is the butter block or the fat block that goes inside. And on the outside is the pastry, which you wrap on the outside of that butter block, which you then laminate in order to create the layers. So on the outside, what you want to do is that you want to add the high gluten flour. So it's going to be 120 grams of high gluten flour with the shortening, with the eggs. Now you put that into a machine and you mix it while adding a little bit of water, just until it becomes a dough. Then you turn the mixer up and you turn it up. Until it becomes very, very elastic. What do I mean by elastic? It should be like, if you guys have ever made brioche, when you pull the dough, you should be able to create like a film, like a cling film, thinness of translucent dough. After that, you put that dough into a box like this, and you flatten it out. And I'll tell you why after. And then for the inside, what you want to do, you want to add your 120 grams of shortening with your 120 grams of butter and your 120 grams of flour. Now you put that into a mixer and you mix that with a paddle, and then you put this again into a box which has been lined with cling film. And why do you do that? It's because afterwards, when you've chilled it down, which will probably take overnight, you're going to end up with 2 rectangles, which will make your wrapping and your laminating a lot easier. So when you do this particular dough, I would always suggest that you put a cloth on the bottom of your work surface. So, get a cloth, like so, put it on a work surface. And then what we're going to do, flour the work surface. We've got our pastry dough, which this one is the pastry that is made out of the eggs, flour, and the shortening. And we're going to take it out of the box. And you can see how stretchy it is. I want to keep it into a relative rectangle. And what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to roll this out to about double the size. Now the big problem with this one, particular dough, is that it just contains a lot of fat in the middle. And the problem with that, a lot of the time, is that it's very easy for the filling to start mixing out. So you've got your rectangle block, you're going to put that in the middle, Sit in the middle. Neatly. Semi-neatly. And you're going to close it all in. Make it butter tight. What do you want to? If you want to replace the shortening, you can replace it with butter. But my advice to you is probably not to replace the shortening, only because the thing about butter is that as you add more butter to the mixture, what you end up creating is a mass which is a lot harder. This process here, which is this laminating process. What we're going to do now. Again, with this one, don't rush. Whatever you do, don't rush. And I can honestly tell you this from my experience. If you try to rush this particular pastry, you're going to end up creating so much mess because the filling is undoubtedly going to leak out. And once it begins to leak out, you're in big problems because it ends up becoming a continuous battle and struggle to keep the filling inside. But be patient. Be patient with this. Really, I cannot advise you more for this video. If you don't want to be patient, just don't make this one. You know, there are other dim sums that you can make. What we're trying to do all the time is to keep that rectangular shape. And the beauty of the cloth is that it doesn't stick. Again, be very, very gentle. Right, so what we're going to do from here, now we've got our, it's rolled out. Well, I'm going to fold this into 3 or 4. Right, I'll fold it into 3. Fold one half in. Stand it down. Fold the other half across. Now, because it's on a cloth, I can just lift the cloth up and roll it over. And now this is the first fold. Okay? Now, from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to wrap it up and I'm going to put it in the fridge. You know, if you were using butter, for example, you wouldn't have to put it in the fridge because your butter would be firm enough that it would hold. It would hold and it wouldn't leak out from the filling warming up to the point that it starts oozing out. So, my particular filling, because I've used shortening, and the day is so hot today, it's getting very, very soft very, very quickly. So I'm going to put this like so. I'm going to put this into the fridge. I have any space in my fridge. So, not put it in the fridge. But my other alternative, you guys, and you're going to have to work with me here on the Blue Peter, is that the alternative to not making this pastry is to basically use ready bought puff pastry. Now, it's nowhere near as nice, right? But what I want to show you is use this pastry to show you what happens when you bring it out after the first fold. Okay, so when you bring that first pastry out of the fridge, it's going to look like this. Okay, as you can see, this is the pastry we made. This is what we're going to end up with. Okay, once your pastry is like this, again, on the floured cloth, we're going to just bat it out. And I roll it out. And what I want to do, this one, I want to get 4 folds out of it. Why? Because you do 3 folds the first time, 4 folds the second, you're going to end up with 12 layers. Now, the maximum I like to go with this is probably 16 layers. 16 layers means you're doing a 4 fold on the first and then a 4 fold on the second. Right? With puff pastry, a lot of times you're making a millefeuille or whatever, you're talking about thousands and thousands of layers. And that's okay, but that's not what we're doing here. For this particular dough, we want to be able to see the layers. I don't want thousands of layers. I want to be able to see all 12 layers. That's what makes this dish special to me. So if we're going to make a 4 fold, unlike the first time, we're going to fold the 2 ends into the middle. Fold this over. So now it's 3 plus the 4. Now this will make a 12-fold tart now. So what we're going to do, we're going to continue with this. How long do you leave the second fold in the fridge? Depends how cold your fridge is. So on a day like this, I could leave it in my fridge. It'll probably take all night in order for it to firm up. The whole point of leaving it in the fridge is for the filling to basically set. The filling to set so that when you roll it, that's the most important thing. So we're going to start rolling it out. Now this is the point where we start making tarts. When you roll this out, my other tip for you guys is that you want to aim for about 3 millimeter thickness. And because you're standing over this, you will think that 3 millimeters is actually very, very thick, very quick to achieve. But actually, 3 millimeters is actually very, very thin. Whenever you think, oh, that must be 3 millimeters, basically just roll it a little bit thinner. Three millimeters, right? That's 3 millimeters. In my book, it's nearly 3 millimeters. Another thing is, because it's on a cloth, don't do all of this business and lifting it up and rolling it back over, because every time you do that, what you're doing is you're stretching the dough. Now, what I want to create is an egg tart which has got even layers. So now after this, we get our cutter. What size cutter do you want to use? You want to use the size of the cutter, which is relative to the size of your mold. So here we have 2 different types of mold. So we have a smaller mold and a larger mold. Right, today we're going to make the smaller ones. So I'm going to use this cutter. We've cut out 3 portions there. What we're going to do is we're going to get the tart, put it into the mold. We're going to push in the middle. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to expose the layers. When you try this yourself, what you'll think is really easy to do, you'll end up merging the layers. Now, when you merge the layers, what will happen is that when you cook it out, you won't be able to see, differentiate between the 12 layers that you've corrected. So afterwards, I'm going to run my hand down the middle, pushing it up the side. Pushing it up the side to basically expose the layers. You know, if you look at it closely, you can see the layers that are being created. Now, if I just go, what one thing you should never do is cut it. If you start using a knife and cut the edge off, you're basically going to merge all the layers together. And when it cooks out, you won't be able to see the lines, which to me is a big no-no. Now, that's your tart there. What I would normally do, I would cut, I'd probably make about 15 of them, and then I would put them in on a tray into the fridge. Now, into the fridge, you probably take a good few hours to chill down before cooking. So, and why do you chill down and not just cook the mold straight away? If you don't chill down the mold, what will happen again is because it's so warm today, what will happen is that the filling will begin to melt out of the pastry, and again you'll begin to merge the layers together, and again you won't be able to see the individual layers. The recipe for the filling is very simple. It's basically sugar syrup, which is water and sugar, and then it's egg, and it's evaporated milk. And basically what you do, you get your sugar syrup, so you put your sugar and your water into a bowl, you bring it up to the boil until it's completely dissolved. Then you chill it. You chill it until it's cold. You don't want to add egg into a hot sugar syrup because it will cook the egg, which is a no-no. And after that, you add the egg and you add the evaporated milk. You mix it all together. Now, my big tip for you here is to get a sieve and pass this mixture through a sieve 3 or 4 times. What I will do, it will get rid of air bubbles, number one. And number two, it will create a smoother finish for egg tart. So what you end up with is a mixture like so. Right? And now we've got egg tart, and we have our filling. Now preheat your oven to about 180 to 190. Now also, I'd like to tell you that all your domestic ovens are rubbish a lot of the time. When they say 200, it doesn't mean 200. 200 means it could range from anything from about 180 to about 210. But you want to get it relatively hot. Now what you want to do, you want to get your tart into your tray. Yep. And then in a measuring jug, fill it up about 80% full. 80% full like this. And then put it into your hot oven. And cook it. Again, no fan. Don't turn the fan on. And cook it for approximately 15 to 20 minutes. But again, because all domestic ovens are very variant, what you're looking for is for the pastry to be cooked on the outside, as in slightly lightly golden brown, and a filling just to have a little wobble in the middle. And it will take some practice. If you put too much filling in, what will happen is that it will bubble over the edge. If you don't put enough filling in, nothing too much bad will happen, except you just won't have the right balance of flavor when you eat it. And then when you cook it, when it's ready, what you should end up with is a pastry which is like so. I just want to show you what I want to show you. I want to show you the layers. You see the layers there? To me, those layers are what make an egg tart special. We've got our egg tart, which somehow magically cooks very, very quickly in the matter of seconds. Now, in a restaurant, we're going to turn this into a savory course when we reopen. So this egg tart will be served with probably some kind of savory parfait, which will probably freeze and it will grate over the top. But for here, if you want to stay in the sweet world, people in China or Hong Kong don't usually serve with anything. You usually just eat this by itself. But actually, I always think that, what doesn't taste nice with clotted cream? Actually, if I was wanting to serve this as a dessert course, I would probably serve it with some clotted cream. Now, my plating tip to you guys is that when you plate this, put your clotted cream to cover only half, expose half, so that your guest can still see the layers of the other half. Because the beauty of this really is in eating the pastry and eating it and watching it flake apart. So that if I cut this up now, I'm sure you can hear this, but you can see the exposed layers. There you go. And guys, what we've covered today, we've covered the dumplings and we've covered the egg tart. I know it's a lot to take in, and actually it's very difficult to do these two things. And you know, I'm still trying to perfect them on a daily basis. But it just takes practice. It does take practice. You've got the fundamentals now, you've got the basics. So it's all up to you now to go and practice it and make your perfect pot stickers and make your perfect egg tarts. Thank you very much.